Night falls over a quiet office. A stack of folders sits like unanswered prayers, and somewhere a stamp meets paper with the thud of judgment. 21 names, 21 shadows cast across a nation's future. Elders, aunties, uncles, gather close. We have a testimony to weigh, a road to remember, and a promise to keep. What happens to a people when borrowed glory sits where hard-won skill should stand? What happens to bridges when the plans were purchased, not learned? What happens to children when their curriculum is drawn by hands that never taught? We have seen this story before, have we not? In our own lives, in our own cities, in our own history, when titles shouted louder than truth and credentials tried to crown what character had not earned. But tonight, we will follow a different path, told with patience and fire, with sorrow and hope. We shall move slowly, then rise, then hold still, like a choir that knows when to breathe and when to break the silence. Before we go further, beloved family, please subscribe and ring the bell so that every truth finds you first, every time. Share this moment with someone you love, because what we are about to unfold concerns every honest hand that has ever built a life the long way. On the morning of the 4th of September, in the year 2025, the Council of Ministers gathered in Ouagadougou. The air was thick with expectation, though many in that chamber did not yet know that history was waiting just outside the door. At the head of the table sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré, sometimes called President Traoré, sometimes remembered as the soldier who carried the hopes of a weary nation. That morning, he carried something else, a list. 21 names written in ink but carved truly into the conscience of a people. One by one, those names represented ministries, departments, and directorates. Places where decisions had been made that touched the lives of millions. Behind those names were men and women who had climbed into power not by discipline, not by merit, not by sacrifice, but by fraud. For years their chairs had been warmed by lies, their diplomas were counterfeit, their titles were stolen, their knowledge was as hollow as the paper they carried. Yet still, they signed budgets, directed hospitals, approved engineering projects, and designed school curricula. Let us pause here, family. Imagine a bridge designed by hands that never studied engineering. Imagine a health system guided by officials who never once passed through medical training. Imagine a nation's budget balanced by men and women who never learned the mathematics of finance. This was not imagination in Burkina Faso. This was reality. The people had been governed by shadows, and on that day, the light was finally switched on. Government spokesman Pingdwenda Gilbert Ouedraogo stood before the people to explain the operation. The words fell like hammers. Comprehensive verification of all senior positions, direct confirmation with universities and issuing institutions, cross-referencing of graduation records, investigation of fraudulent certification networks. What had begun as a quiet audit quickly grew into a firestorm. The audit revealed not one, not two, but 21 high-ranking officials who had fabricated their entire educational backgrounds. Some had forged degrees from universities that did not exist. Others had bought credentials from so-called degree mills in neighboring countries. Still others relied on bribed clerks within real institutions to print transcripts that never matched the truth. The positions they held were no small matter. Ministry directors responsible for health programs, yet without medical knowledge. Technical advisors whispering into the ears of government ministers, yet without a day of training in their supposed fields. Economic planners entrusted with the nation's finances, yet unable to read a balance sheet. Education officials drawing up curricula for the children of the nation, yet never trained as teachers. Agriculture advisors leading farmers into policy failures, yet without a single season spent in the soil. Brothers and sisters, hear me now. These were not harmless pretenders. These were saboteurs of progress, thieves of opportunity, and agents of stagnation. For every fraudulent appointment, a genuine graduate was turned away. For every fake diploma, a real scholar remained unemployed. For every unqualified decision, the people paid the price, in failed projects, in wasted resources, in broken trust. On the 11th of September, President Traoré made the verdict known. 21 officials dismissed with immediate effect. No severance, no soft landing. Their names and positions published for the nation to see. Criminal investigations launched for fraud and forgery. Assets frozen for those suspected of financial corruption. And perhaps most importantly, a declaration that every decision made under their tenure would be subject to review. It was not just the removal of people. It was the cleansing of policies, the reversal of damage, the wiping clean of records long stained by deceit. The words that followed were simple but heavy. We will not tolerate fraud in any form. With that, the nation of Burkina Faso drew a line. On one side lay the years of compromise, corruption, and counterfeit. On the other stood the possibility of a new day built on competence, honesty, and truth. Family, let us not miss the moral here. This is not merely about Burkina Faso. This is about every place where falsehood has been allowed to sit in the seat of power. This is about every system where connections matter more than qualifications. This is about every generation that has been told to wait while liars advance. And you know this truth in your bones, because many of us have lived it. Some of you listening tonight worked twice as hard for half the recognition because someone else had a shortcut, a cousin, a forged paper, a bought privilege. The injustice is not foreign, it is familiar. So when Ibrahim Traoré stood with his list of 21, he was not just cutting out rot from a government. He was declaring to his people and to the world that the era of false crowns was over. From now on, authority would have to be earned, not bought. Responsibility would be matched with real preparation, not with counterfeit prestige. But family, if 21 names shook a nation, what happens when the list grows longer than the page? What happens when the light reveals not just a circle, but an entire continent wrapped in shadows? Family. The ink was hardly dry on those dismissal orders before the tremors spread beyond Ouagadougou. Like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples moved quickly, first across Burkina Faso, then across West Africa, then across the whole continent. 21 names had been called out, but behind them stood a mountain of secrets waiting to be revealed. The investigation uncovered a truth that many had whispered about, but few had dared to confront. The fake diploma epidemic was not a local embarrassment. It was a continental disease. Intelligence briefings spoke of more than 200 diploma mills operating across West Africa. Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, countries where fraudulent universities could sell you a degree for as little as $500 or as much as $5,000 if you wanted a title that sounded grand. These were not flimsy certificates printed in back rooms. No, these were elaborate operations with glossy websites, fake accreditation boards, and international partners that gave them the appearance of legitimacy. Family, let us consider the damage. Conservative estimates suggest over 500,000 fake diplomas are circulating in governments, businesses, and institutions across the region. 500,000! That means 500,000 jobs stolen, 500,000 chances lost, 500,000 lives built on lies. And here is the bitter truth. It was not just petty fraudsters keeping these mills alive. It was corrupt government officials who greased the wheels, who looked the other way, who made sure their friends and cousins could jump the line while qualified young people waited in the dust. Now, pause with me here. Think of the projects delayed, the budgets wasted, the classrooms mismanaged, the hospitals understaffed, all because fraud wore the uniform of authority. Think of the bridges collapsing, not from the weight of cars, but from the emptiness of knowledge. Think of the policies failing, not from lack of resources, but from lack of competence. This is not just incompetence, this is betrayal. And the reaction, beloved, was immediate. In Nigeria, estimates whispered that more than 10,000 federal officials might be holding questionable degrees. Imagine the panic in Abuja as ministries scrambled to prepare their own audits. In Ghana, Parliament opened investigations and began hearings on fraudulent credentials, summoning officials to account for their pasts. In Ivory Coast, ministries trembled as preliminary audits uncovered massive problems. In Senegal, universities were overwhelmed with requests to verify credentials. In Mali, officials slipped quietly across borders, hoping to avoid the same scrutiny that had just fallen like fire in Burkina Faso. But it did not stop there. The fear spread not just across Africa but into Western capitals. Because here is the deeper truth, family. When African governments are staffed with qualified, competent people, they are harder to control. Western powers prefer to deal with the unprepared, the compromised, the corrupt, because those officials are easier to bend, easier to bribe, easier to manipulate. When Captain Traoré set a standard of verified excellence, Washington, Paris, and London felt the ground shift beneath their feet. Reports surfaced of frantic meetings in foreign embassies. Analysts warned that if Burkina Faso's model spread, entire governments across Africa could face a personnel crisis. Imagine a continent where every ministry, every department, every agency had to prove its officials were truly qualified. The exposure would not just claim dozens, but hundreds, perhaps thousands. And with each dismissal, the old order of corruption would lose its grip. Elders, this was more than a scandal. This was a revolution in disguise. Because once people taste the power of competence, they cannot go back to mediocrity. Once citizens see bridges built correctly, budgets balanced properly, hospitals staffed by real doctors, schools guided by trained educators, they will no longer accept fraud as normal. And that is why the purge of 21 officials sent fear, not just into dishonest hearts, but into the very foundations of a system that had thrived on lies for decades. Let me tell you, the youth of Africa were watching closely. On social media, hashtags like "No Fake Diplomas" and "African Excellence" gained millions of engagements. University students from Lagos to Nairobi, from Accra to Johannesburg, demanded the same audits for their own leaders. They said, if it can happen in Burkina Faso, why not here? If Captain Traoré can demand integrity, why not our president, our ministers, our mayors? The cry was contagious, the momentum unstoppable. And this is where the story reaches its boiling point. Because what began as an internal purge quickly became a continental mirror. Other governments had no choice but to confront what they had long hidden. Audits began, rumors swirled, politicians scrambled. Some promised reform, others tried to suppress the conversation. But the people had already seen the example. They had already tasted the idea that power should rest in the hands of the qualified, not the counterfeit. Beloved, let us not mistake the stakes. This was not just about 21 names. It was about the credibility of governance across an entire continent. And when credibility collapses, so too do the excuses that shield corruption. This is why fear spread faster than the truth. Because if Burkina Faso could purge fraud, then no government was safe from exposure. And yet, elders, this fire did not only burn away what was false, it lit a path for what could be. Family, when you tear away the veil of deception, two things remain: the wounds left by falsehood and the healing that truth begins to bring. In Burkina Faso, The dismissal of 21 officials did not just open a scandal, it opened a season of reckoning. And as the dust began to settle, the people started to see the difference between government led by shadows and government led by light. Let us walk slowly through the consequences, because they are many and they are mighty. First came the practical, immediate outcomes. The 21 dismissed officials were not replaced with more of the same. No, Captain Ibrahim Traoré and his council turned to a different pool: the overlooked, the underestimated, the genuine. Junior staff with verified credentials were promoted. Burkina professionals working abroad were invited home to serve. Competitive examinations were opened so that talent, not connection, determined who held office. Mentorship programs paired younger leaders with experienced, trustworthy officials. And for the first time in years, the appointment of a minister or a director felt like a victory for the people, not for a hidden network. And what followed, beloved, was like night and day. Policies began to take shape that were grounded in real expertise. Infrastructure projects that had long suffered from delay and mismanagement began to move with efficiency. Budgets showed signs of discipline, with resources flowing to where they were truly needed. Public services, from hospitals to schools to local administrations, improved in ways that citizens could feel in their daily lives. Even international negotiations took on a new tone, as Burkina Faso sent representatives who could stand confidently, armed with real knowledge and real preparation. One citizen put it this way: "For the first time, I feel like the people in those offices actually know what they are talking about." Another said, "The difference is like a lamp being lit in a dark room. Suddenly, things make sense." The economic impact was swift. Early indicators suggested savings of over $45 million annually due to reduced inefficiency and corruption. Infrastructure projects that had once dragged on now reached completion within schedule and budget. Investors, often cautious about dealing with African governments, noted an increase in confidence. They began to say, "Here is a nation that takes competence seriously. Here is a partner we can trust." But family, the consequences were not only material, they were moral. For decades, young Burkina graduates had felt shut out of their own system, watching as unqualified elites claimed positions that rightfully belonged to them. For women, for rural students, for those without family connections, the message had long been clear: your merit does not matter here. That message was shattered. Women with genuine expertise began to take leadership positions, not because of quotas, but because merit was finally respected. Young people with fresh ideas and honest qualifications entered the halls of government. Rural candidates, once excluded, found opportunities through transparent examinations. The injustice of stolen opportunities was being reversed. And yet, let us be honest, this was not without pain. The revelation of fraud forced many to look back at wasted years. How many projects had failed because the wrong people held the pen? How many hospitals had lacked medicine because budgets were mismanaged? How many classrooms had gone without books because decisions were made by the unqualified? These questions weighed heavily, especially on elders who remembered the struggles of independence and the hopes of early nationhood. The pain was real. The loss was deep. Still, from sorrow rises strength. With each genuine appointment, hope took root again. Citizens began to believe that competence was not just a dream, but a standard that could be enforced. Young Africans across the continent saw a model: that their studies, their sacrifices, their late nights in the library, their prayers before examinations, all of it mattered. That their hard-earned degrees would no longer be worthless in the face of counterfeit. that their future would not be stolen by fraudsters in expensive suits. Beloved family, this is where the story turns from anger to expectation. Because what was once dismissed as impossible, merit-based governance in Africa, was now visible before their very eyes. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So I ask you, elders and family across the diaspora, in your own lifetime, have you witnessed an institution change for the better because it finally placed competence above connections? Was it a school, a church, a workplace, a city council? Share that testimony in the comments, for your story may strengthen another soul who doubts that change is possible. And now, family, let us pause. For if competence can rebuild a ministry, can it also rebuild a continent? Family, what happens in Ouagadougou does not stay in Ouagadougou. When a government in West Africa declares that fraud will no longer rule, the echo reaches Harlem, Detroit, Atlanta, and Chicago. It resonates with every elder who remembers fighting for the right to sit in a classroom, to graduate with dignity, to prove that knowledge, not prejudice, was the true measure of worth. Let us be plain. The dismissal of 21 officials in Burkina Faso may seem like an African story, but it is also an American lesson, because fraud and favoritism are not limited by geography. We know it here. We have seen it in school boards where politics outweighed children's needs. We have seen it in workplaces where connections were valued more than competence. We have seen it in city halls where loyalty counted more than service. And in every case, beloved, the people suffered. This is why the stand of Captain Traoré matters to us. It reminds us that truth is not only a cultural value, it is a universal need. Just as we once marched for civil rights, demanding equality under the law, so too must societies everywhere demand equality under merit. The lesson is the same. No more false crowns, no more counterfeit callings, no more paper thrones. Internationally, the reactions told a deeper story. In Paris, officials worried aloud that competent African leaders would refuse foreign guidance. In Washington, analysts warned that stronger institutions meant fewer opportunities to manipulate policy. In Brussels, there were calls for gradual transition, code words for slowing down change until influence could be preserved. And at the United Nations, expressions of concern masked a deeper fear, that independent, competent African governance would require international organizations to treat Africa as an equal partner, not as a subordinate. But family, competence is contagious. If it is good for Ouagadougou, it is good for Accra. If it is good for Accra, it is good for Lagos. And if it is good for Lagos, tell me, church, ain't it good for us all? This is the global ripple. When one nation proves that fraud can be purged and merit can rule, others are forced to reckon with their own shadows. And when elders like you, in the pews and living rooms of America, nod your heads and say, yes, this is right, you join the chorus of change. For the struggle for integrity is not bound by borders. It is a universal calling. So let us stand together, family, from Ouagadougou to Oakland, from Burkina Faso to Baltimore, and let us declare, truth belongs in power, and power must serve truth. But if truth is good for Ouagadougou, tell me, family, ain't truth good for us all? Family, when 21 names were struck from the record, it was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré and the Burkina nation, the road ahead is not merely about punishment for past fraud, but about building a future where truth cannot be stolen, where merit cannot be faked, and where excellence is the standard. The first step on this road is building systems that cannot be fooled. Transparent examinations for public service positions, competitive recruitment that welcomes every qualified son and daughter of the nation, and digital record systems that trace every credential to its source. Fraud thrives in shadows, but technology and transparency can flood those shadows with light. Second comes investment in education itself. Genuine excellence is not imported, it is cultivated. Universities must be strengthened, curricula sharpened, faculty supported, and young scholars given scholarships in critical fields: engineering, medicine, agriculture, technology, and finance. For a nation to stand on its own, its foundations must be built by hands that truly know the craft. Third is mentorship. A nation cannot change course with policy alone. It needs leaders shaped by wisdom. The vision is to pair experienced officials of proven integrity with younger staff, so that competence is not only taught but modeled. In this way, the culture of governance shifts from corruption to integrity, from shortcuts to stewardship. And let us not forget the wider vision. This is not only about Burkina Faso, it is about Africa rising into a new meritocracy. It is about women stepping forward into roles long denied, not by favor, but by rightful qualification. It is about young graduates seeing government service not as a place of compromise, but as a place of calling. It is about rural students knowing that their effort in the classroom can carry them as far as their talent and discipline allow. Family, hear me now. The road ahead is not easy. There will be resistance. There will be those who prefer the old ways of connection over competence, who cling to counterfeit power because real preparation is beyond them. But the standard has been set. The example has been made, and the youth of Africa and the elders of the diaspora have seen too much to go back. This is why we must hold fast to the word, to the promise, to the testimony of that day. Because if one captain can set fire to fraud in his house, who will be the next to do the same? If Burkina Faso can demand verified excellence, who will follow? If the light has been lit in Ouagadougou, who will carry it across the continent? Stay with me, family, because the benediction is still to come. Family, let us bring the testimony home. On the 4th of September, in the year 2025, 21 names were erased from the seats of power. Yet what Captain Ibrahim Traoré began was more than a purge. It was a proclamation. A declaration that no counterfeit crown shall govern a people's destiny, that no paper throne shall weigh more than true preparation, that no fraud shall sit where only faithfulness, merit, and knowledge belong. And what have we seen since? Bridges designed with care, budgets balanced with sense, hospitals guided by trained hands, schools led by teachers who have truly walked the road of learning, policies written not by pretenders, but by proven minds. This is not fantasy. It is the fruit of demanding integrity. Beloved elders, this is the word we must pass on to our grandchildren, that truth is worth fighting for, that knowledge is sacred, that service without competence is betrayal. We must remind them that justice is not only about fairness in the courtroom, but about fairness in opportunity, fairness in leadership, fairness in who gets to hold the pen of power. Now let me ask you, what lesson will you leave behind? What story will you tell your children and your children's children about the value of hard work, the dignity of honest study, the blessing of real preparation? If this word spoke to you, subscribe, share this message with one friend, and leave verified excellence in the comments. For together, we are more than an audience. We are a community, a family, a congregation that believes in truth. The Ibrahim Traoré speech has become more than a national address. It has become a continental sermon. And though some call him only the Burkina Faso president, to millions, he has become a symbol of what is possible when integrity is lifted above corruption. His words ring not only in Ouagadougou, but across the diaspora, across every place where people hunger for leaders who are real, who are proven, who are worthy. So, let us close with this. The Ibrahim Traoré speech may have started in one council chamber, but its echo belongs to us all. May the work of honest hands heal the land. May truth take its rightful seat in power. And may we, wherever we are, demand nothing less than excellence.